Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a Bulls insider at Stadium, sports reporter at ABC7, and the host of the Gimme The Hot Sauce podcast with Stacey King. Please welcome Mark Schanowski to the program. Mark, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm great, John. Great to be back with you.
So, Mark, what's your evaluation of the Bulls season to start?
It was, I think, a little bit of a disappointment. You know, with Billy Donovan coming in the new front office, the hope was that they could make a run at one of the playoff spots in the Eastern Conference, or at least get into that play-in tournament. And unfortunately, there were a lot of things that went wrong along the way. They had players miss time because of COVID. Then they made the big trade, which really kind of changed the whole approach in terms of their style of play on the offensive end. And as they were going through that learning curve, then Zach LaVine went out for 11 games because of the COVID protocols, and that really kind of put them behind the eight ball. They went on a losing streak, which pretty much knocked them out of the play-in tournament. But, you know, at least the foundation now is set for what this team is going to look like going forward. They have two all-star caliber players in Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine, and they're going to build around those guys. I would expect Arturas Karnisovas is going to be extremely aggressive this summer in trying to get the right pieces around those two. And I think when training camp opens in late September, they're going to have a team that is going to be definitely a contender for a playoff spot next season.
Did the trade actually help them or hurt them this year? Because you mentioned the learning curve was an issue.
I think short term it definitely hurt them because they were a team that was playing one of the youngest rosters in the NBA, and they were playing at one of the fastest paces in the league. But then all of a sudden you bring in a player like Vucevic, who is averaging close to 24 points a game and is an accomplished low-post scorer, and Billy Donovan, with really no practice time because of the condensed schedule, had to try to change the offense on the fly. They ended up moving Daniel Tyson to the starting lineup, so they're almost going with a Twin Towers lineup, and they were trying to run their offense through Vucevic in the post. And it was a change for Zach LaVine. It was a change for Coby White, and basically just about every player on the roster. And I think that because there was such limited practice time this year, they never were really to get comfortable with what they were trying to do on both ends of the court. And I think it kind of set them back a little bit. Now, when you make a trade for an all-star caliber player, if one becomes available like Vucevic did, you know, you have to be aggressive and you have to pounce and try to figure it out later. Unfortunately, in this instance, especially with Zach missing those games, it wasn't good enough to get them to the playoffs. But I think that if you'd ask Arturas if he would do it again, he would say absolutely.
Were they a playoff caliber team on paper, at least?
I'm not sure exactly if that's accurate or not. I mean, I think that they had the pieces that look like, if you just take each one of them separately, you know, there's some pretty good players. But in basketball, like in any other team sport, it's all about chemistry and having that continuity with your roster. And unfortunately, the Bulls didn't have that. That's why I think this summer, where, you know, some of the guys will get to play summer league, you know, in terms of Patrick Williams and some of the other young guys, and then you'll have to get a full training camp to implement Billy Donovan's offense and really get comfortable with the things Vucevic does. And there's also the chance that during this summer they may go out and aggressively pursue what they consider a starting caliber point guard, and then that would be another new piece to work in. So this team desperately is in need of practice time and a full training camp to see what they can be with the various pieces on the roster.
Now word from our sponsor, True Classic Tees. Are you tired of boxy T-shirts that just won't get the job done? What about ones that feel too big and uncomfortable? I have that problem a lot, especially as a taller person. Thanks to True Classic Tees, though, those problems are over. See, I'm wearing one right now. Very comfortable, double-stitched for endurance, and custom-made to fit your dimensions. And get this, a portion of every sale goes towards helping homeless veterans get off the streets. So you're helping out our veterans, and you're buying quality material. Listeners of this program get a discount too. Use John10, that's Jon10, to get 10% off your next purchase. Go to TrueClassicTees.com or find the link in the description of this video. True Classic Tees, top clothing and a good cause. Mark Schanowski here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, is Coby White then not going to be the next point guard for the Bulls?
I think Coby White showed the front office and the coaching staff over the last 20 or so games when he moved back into the starting lineup that he does have more potential as a lead guard than what maybe they thought. I think even though he's only 21 years old and 2 years in the league, he had kind of already been pigeonholed as a sixth man, Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams type, and that, you know, maybe his ceiling wasn't going to be as a starting point guard in the league. And I think that he showed during the time that Zach was out, yes, his scoring totals grew, but also he was more effective as a playmaker. His assist numbers jumped as well, and he was able to cut down on his turnovers. His splits were very good over the last 20 to 25 games when he moved back into the starting lineup. And I think he might have opened some eyes with Billy Donovan and Maurice Cheeks and the rest of the coaching staff that, maybe we should stick with this guy and see if he can work. There had been so much speculation during the season. I know we talked about it last time about the possibility of acquiring Lonzo Ball. I don't think that's something that's going to happen. I think that during the trade deadline, they first approached New Orleans about a potential sign and trade, not a sign and trade, but involving two guys who were going to be restricted free agents at the end of the year, that being Lauri Markkanen for Lonzo Ball. And the Pelicans wanted a sweetener, and the Bulls decided that they were going to trade those future number ones to Orlando in the Vucevic deal. So Arturas was working different trade scenarios at the same time, and it turned out that the Vucevic thing became something that could get done. He pounced on that, and the Lonzo thing kind of fell by the wayside. Ball is going to be a restricted free agent this summer, looking for a long-term contract in the neighborhood of $20 million per season. And that's pretty rich when you consider the numbers that he's put up so far in his career. I think the Bulls would like a point guard like that, but I don't think they're going to be in position to get into a bidding war, especially when you look at their cap situation, which is not terrible, but it's not great either.
Who could they then sign or bring in that situation?
Well, I think that most of the guys that the fan base would be excited about would be high-ticket items. You could go for the Chris Paul type fix like they had in Phoenix. Obviously, that's been one of the big stories in the playoffs with the Suns knocking off the Lakers and sending them home in round one. Chris Paul, coming in as a veteran, was able to bring out the best in Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, and that entire roster. And, if the Utah Jazz are moving on to the second round in the West, Mike Conley, their point guard, is going to be a free agent. He could be a guy that might want to re-enter the market and try to improve his financial situation. But, he's in his mid-30s now, and I can't see the Bulls being a team that's going to break the bank. And for a veteran like Conley, his first-year contract would start at something close to $40 million, which means you'd have to get rid of a number of players on the roster to get to that number. I just think that it's going to be very difficult to add in a guy that is going to be that much better than Kobe White. Bulls fans, I'm sure, will think about, well, what about Derrick Rose? He's a free agent again. But I think it's kind of the been there, done that with the Bulls organization. And plus, he played so well for Tom Thibodeau. The Knicks have a mountain of cap space. I think the Knicks will do right by Derrick and offer him a very attractive contract this summer.
What's your take on Zach LaVine and his situation?
I think that the Bulls will talk to his representatives and see if they can get that early extension done. The problem is, because of salary cap rules, Zach would have to give them a hometown discount to take that extension. And in some of the comments he's made, even though he loves Chicago, he loves the Bulls organization, he's made it clear that he expects to be paid whatever the market will bear. So my guess is that this is going to go into next summer. Zach will play out the last year of his contract, become an unrestricted free agent, and then the Bulls will have to, convince him that this is the best situation. Obviously, since he's their own free agent, they can offer him an extra year and higher percentage raises, which means the total financial package would be greater. And if they make the playoffs next year and Zach is happy with his experience, hopefully it'll be a situation where, he wants to stay in Chicago and play the rest of his career here. But, I think it's very much to be determined. I think it's kind of unlikely they'll be able to work out an early extension with Zach.
How impressed were you by his overall growth this year?
I was very impressed. I thought that he showed some amazing progress in a lot of different areas. Now, people say he's a bad defensive player. I wouldn't say he's a bad defensive player. I think at times his focus drifts a little bit. He's vulnerable to those weak side cuts when he's kind of ball watching. But I think that in terms of being an on-the-ball defender, he's pretty solid. And I think that when you look at what he did offensively, his numbers were almost historic. I forget the exact list, but he was on a list with players like Kevin Durant and Larry Bird for guys that were able to shoot 50, 40, 80% and shoot, average over 25 points a game, which is a pretty impressive list. I thought that Zach really showed a lot of growth in a lot of areas, and I think that that's going to continue in the next season.
How much of that has to do with Billy Donovan, and how much of it has to do with Zach maturing as a player?
I think Billy was a good coach for him. I think that one of the things that he'd like to do was do private little film studies with guys and show them things they were doing well and things that they were doing not so well. And I think that his style was much better than when Jim Boylan was in and was trying to kind of crack the whip and really show tough love to these guys. I think that, the modern NBA player responds better to positive reinforcement than they do to somebody yelling at him all the time. And I think that Zach really liked Billy Donovan's coaching style. And at the same point, you look at that coaching staff and with Billy Donovan, who was an accomplished point guard in college, and then Maurice Cheeks, who's a Hall of Fame player, I think they were able to show Zach some of the areas where he could improve in terms of being a facilitator, not always looking for his own shot and trying to make sure that he was scoring his points, but also to find his teammates when they had advantageous matchups. And I thought Zach did a nice job at times of running the offense and getting the ball to other guys. The label that he was a selfish player, an empty stats guy, I think that's gradually going away. But until he can get the Bulls into the playoffs, the Zach detractors will always, kind of fall back on the fact that he's never been to the playoffs, never had a winning season, and they'll label him a losing player.
Are you a Zach detractor?
No, I'm not. I like Zach. I think that, I've enjoyed my conversations with him. I know he's committed to winning. When you look at the workouts that he puts himself through during the summer, I mean, the guy is all basketball. And, for anybody who thinks that, he doesn't care about winning, they are badly mistaken. I mean, this is a guy that unfortunately throughout his career has been put on a lot of rebuilding situations with very little veteran help. And now the roster's starting to take shape where, you've got a guy like Thaddeus Young coming off a great year who has one more year left on his deal. They bring in another all-star in Vucevic. Hopefully they can find a way to bring Daniel Tice back as well. And then all of a sudden he's got some veteran help and everything doesn't fall on his shoulders to be the guy that's got to score 30 every day and take all the tough shots when the shot clock is running down.
Mark Schanowski here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, is Lauri Markkanen returning?
I would say it's pretty unlikely. He and his agent are going to be looking for a contract that's probably too rich for the Bulls' blood. When you look back at what happened after the Vucevic trade, after just one game, Billy Donovan decided that Vucevic and Lauri Markkanen were not a good pairing together in the starting lineup, and he moved Lauri to the bench. And then not only that, but because of the fact he had Tice and Thaddeus Young at the floor, he told Lauri, well, you're going to be my backup small forward at 7 foot 1 inch. So Lauri, who's not a great defensive player to start with, was forced to guard some of the quickest players in the league, and that was a bad matchup for him. He was also playing reduced minutes, so his numbers were dropping in all categories, which is a horrible thing for a guy heading into restricted free agency. The one positive for Lauri's camp is that so many teams were freeing up cap space anticipating a big free agent class in 2021, which will not be that way because of all the stars that signed extensions with their current teams. A guy like Markkanen may become more attractive to a team that has a lot of cap space and won't be able to hold it over into next season because of the roster that they have. So he may find that he may still get a good contract. I just don't think it's going to come from the Bulls. If someone offers Lauri $18 million a year for 4 years, I think the Bulls will just say, well, it's been nice knowing you. Go ahead and good luck in your new situation.
Why did he regress so much? I mean, we remember his second year in the league, did great, 19 points per game, really looked like he turned a corner. Now today he's at his worst. Why do you think that is?
I don't know that his game regressed as much as I think expectations grew to an unrealistic level. As you mentioned, during his second season, he had that famous month of February where he averaged 26 points and 12 rebounds a game. And everyone kind of looked at the fact that he was an athletic 7-footer who could shoot the ball from long distance and said, this guy's going to be a future all-star in the league. Well, when it didn't happen because of injuries and roster composition and a lot of different things, and the fact he didn't develop as well as people thought, everyone started to think that, Lauri Markkanen is a bust. And I think the truth is somewhere in between. I think that expectations grew because, the fan base was desperately looking for the next star, the next guy that could carry the Bulls to contention in the Eastern Conference, and they thought that maybe Lauri could be that guy. And he's a quiet kid. He's a family man now at age 23, and, he has a lot of responsibilities off the court that, I mentioned Zach's drive, and I'm not saying that Lauri isn't motivated, but I think that he does not have that motor that runs as high as some other NBA players. And I think that, he has to take a look in the mirror this summer and decide how good does he really want to be. And I think that the motivation for a lot of professional athletes when they go to a new team is that brings out the best and makes them understand that why didn't it work in the last place? I have to make sure it works this next time around. And there's been a lot of speculation that maybe the Spurs would be interested. And, the Spurs is definitely a team first, share the wealth offense that I think Lauri might have a chance to thrive in.
Did the coaching changes play a role at all in how Markkanen ended up?
No, I don't think so. I think that Billy was trying to get the most out of him, just like Fred Hoiberg and Jim Boylan were. I think that with Lauri, he's had a lot of injuries during his 4-year career. He had more injuries last season. He also missed some games because of the COVID protocols. He had a fluke shoulder injury that knocked him out for a long period of time. And, when he came back, as I mentioned, the trade happened and he was asked to play small forward. So, timing is everything for professional athletes and being in the right situation. And I think for a number of series of circumstances, it just didn't work out for Lauri. And, hopefully when he gets to his next team, he will find that right situation, a point guard that will kind of look out for him and make sure he gets the ball in areas where he can be effective. And I think that Lauri can still be a very productive player in the league. I just think with the Bulls' current roster composition and the fact that they've kind of made their bed with trying to build around Vucevic and LaVine, that I think it's pretty unlikely they'll invest major dollars in bringing Lauri back.
For the Bulls then for next year, what's their lineup look like if you were to guess right now?
Well, I think what they'll probably try to do is move Patrick Williams to the power forward position, let him start there. I think he's more comfortable playing against the bigger athletes rather than chasing smaller guys on the perimeter. I think they'll try to pursue a shooter to either start at that small forward spot or at least be a heavy minutes guy there. And then obviously it'd be Kobe and Zach in the backcourt with Vucevic at center, maybe backed up by Daniel Tice if they can bring him back.
Are they a playoff team with that composition?
It really just depends on the continuity that I talked about, that what they can get in training camp and find a system that works that's built around Vucevic and Zach. I think they need more shooting. I think that was one of the areas that they were lacking in. If you could get a guy like a Duncan Robinson, who's a free agent in Miami, put him in at the 3 position to play off of Zach and Kobe and Vucevic, I think that would be the kind of guy that would be really good in that starting lineup. And then off the bench, Troy Brown, who showed some promise as a defensive wing, could be used off the bench. You'd have Tice if you could bring him back. And, I think Thad Young will be back. I don't know about Sato. I think that they may decline their player option on Sato just to free up some cap space. They'll have to fill out the roster with some minimum salaried guys and maybe some undrafted rookie free agents. I still have some hopes that maybe Devon Dotson can develop as a backup point guard. And, we'll see how they're able to round out the back end of the roster. But I think that they're probably going to go for more shooting rather than a starting caliber point guard. But then AK plays his cards close to the vest, so it's really hard to figure exactly what he's thinking. He may go out in free agency and sign Kyle Lowry. I mean, who knows? He surprised us with the Vucevic trade, and I'm sure there'll be more surprises in store this summer.
Let me ask you this. When could you see the Bulls become a legitimate finals contender?
Well, it's all about development of their young guys. Patrick Williams, when he came into the league and got off to a nice start, he started all but one game for the Bulls this season. People were saying he was baby Kawhi and he's a future All-Star, and he had the physical traits to be a future, an All-Star in the league. Well, his numbers are very modest, but he's only a 19-year-old rookie who was a 4th or 5th option in the offense. And if he can develop into I'm not saying necessarily an All-Star, but a upper caliber starting NBA 4, I think that would really help them a lot. If Kobe White can develop into an above average NBA point guard, and Zach and Vucevic continue to be all-star caliber players, well, then you have the makings of a really nice starting lineup. And if you can have veterans like Tice and Thaddeus Young and maybe develop a young point guard to back up Kobe, I think that, that's a team that can make the playoffs. And if Patrick Williams really does develop into a star, well, then you have a team that can be a team that can go deep into the playoffs in the East.